want to spend some time now in an insightful and telling interview with Donald Trump about his plans for a potential second term. He spoke for more than an hour to Time magazine about how he'd govern if voters sent him back to the White House. The headline, "If he wins." He's promising a massive deportation operation and says he'd be willing to use the military to do it, which would be against the law. Still, Trump said, quote, "If I thought things were getting out of control, I would have no problem using the military per se. We'd have to have safety in our country." And he made clear he'd have no problem putting his finger on the scales of justice. Question: would you fire a U.S. attorney who didn't prosecute someone you ordered him to? Answer: it depends on the situation, honestly. Question: so you might? Answer: it would depend on the situation. Yeah. On the other hand, he said he'd consider pardoning every January 6th rioter. Question: would you consider pardoning every one of them? Answer: I would consider that, yes. You would? Yes, absolutely. Does he expect violence if he loses the election? His answer, quote, "I don't think we're going to have that. I think we're going to win. And if we don't win, it depends. It always depends on the fairness of an election." And he was asked, do you see why so many Americans see language like that, dictator for a day, suspending the Constitution? Trump responded, "I think a lot of people like that." Eric Cortellessa is the reporter who did that interview and joins the discussion now. Thank you so much of this conversation and what you think the takeaway should be for voters.
Well, I interviewed Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago on the Friday before he was set to become the first former and possibly future president to go on criminal trial. And what really struck me from these interviews was that Donald Trump is planning to seize power in a way that he wasn't able to in the first term. He has a team of disciplined, conservative advisors who are drawing up plans to consolidate power in the office of the presidency and remove the guardrails that hindered his ability to carry out his agenda in full in the first term.
And Jeff Zeleny, the other part of this is not just from hearing it from the candidate's own words, which is obviously the most important, but also some of his advisors. Kellyanne Conway, "I don't think it's a big mystery what his agenda would be." Steve Bannon, "I keep telling people, watch the speeches. When you look at the content of what he's putting out there, he couldn't telegraph this any more clearly."
I mean, as we've long seen, he says the quiet part out loud, a phrase we've used ad nauseum since he came into politics. His rallies and speeches are often so long and cluttered with a bunch of different things. It's easy to overlook this, but he has been saying this directly. But to say it directly in an interview is also more striking because he knows the valued real estate of the Time magazine cover. And this is what he believes is a selling point. He believes this is a strong point, and now just amplified by what he calls a need for strong leadership. I think it's even more poignant what we're seeing this week.
And Jackie, I'm going to put up on the screen more information that you got from the former candidate for president, of what a second term would look like. And it just starts with allowing states to prosecute women who violate abortion bans. We talked about immigrants, U.S. attorneys, January 6th. It all goes down to refusing. This is a big one, to come to the aid of NATO allies who don't, quote, pay up. So I think one of the differences between, what we knew Trump in his first term and what could potentially be his second term is he knows where the levers of power are in the federal government. And he has people working to figure out how to bypass those and how to relax some of these things so he can do what he wants to do. Everything you saw there, I don't think, other than because Roe was still in place, other than punishing women who receive abortions in states where they're not allowed, a lot of that he tried to do during the first term. And so this would be a very much a continuation is what he's talking about here. And he had guardrails of people who said, don't do it. And most of those people have either no interest or would not be allowed to go back in. I mean, that was another thing that you got. He said that he would make it a litmus test. If somebody said that they thought the 2020 election was fair and Joe Biden won, they would not work in his administration. But I also want to ask you about abortion, because you have the current president and vice president out very strongly talking about abortion. They believe that that is what is going to rally Democrats to vote. And privately, Donald Trump doesn't disagree with them. Having said that, when you asked about whether states should monitor women's pregnancies so they know if they've got an abortion, he said, I think they might do that. Again, you have to speak to the individual states. What was what was sort of the vibe that you got from him on this issue?
Well, he knows it's extremely delicate. He knows it's a potential vulnerability for him. He takes credit on the one hand for installing 3 Supreme Court justices who had a major hand in overturning Roe, but doesn't want to alienate the vast majority of American voters who think that abortion rights should be protected. Donald Trump is right now staking out a position where he thinks this is a states' rights issue, and he's going to try and leave it at that as much as he can. When I asked him, sir, are you comfortable with red states monitoring women's bodies to know if they've gotten an abortion and passed the ban, he said they might do that. When I said, are you comfortable with states punishing women who've gotten abortions after the ban, he said it's irrelevant what I think because it's up to the states and their determinations. He didn't say he wanted states to do that, but basically said he would allow each state to make their own policies vis-a-vis abortion. And I think that's the sort of ground he's going to try and be on for the coming months before the election.
And Jackie, the comments that he made to Eric that, as you said, we've heard a lot about it, and he tried some of it, that I think any objective way to look at it would be borderline authoritarianism. How much are voters tuned into this, particularly when poll after poll sees that looking at the Trump 4 years in the rearview mirror, there are some rose-colored glasses there?
I think when you're talking about the economy, there is some rose-colored glasses when it comes to Trump. But I think the open question and what you're hearing a lot from the Biden campaign, they're definitely pointing to this as what could potentially be the future. Now, who's going to win out? We'll have to wait and see. I think voters are. I think the summer is usually when people start plugging in. This is a different race because it's the same 2 people. But certainly, Democrats are going to be elevating comments like that, over and over and over again.
Thank you all for being here. Eric, especially you. Really important issue, and the fact that Donald Trump has another Time magazine cover. I'm sure we're going to see that at all of his golf courses on the wall. It's definitely one of his favorite things we know. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
After